Hello everyone, we have reached the final lesson in our unit on vertebrates, and this lesson is all about animal behavior. And this is my favorite topic of probably this entire school year. It's what I did, it's what I still do in some instances, and you'll see that in class. But tonight I wanted to introduce you to some of the information so that we can speed through that part while we're in class and just focus on the fun stuff. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. So there are really two approaches to behavior. You have learned behavior and innate behavior. Learned behavior are focused on by scientists called behaviorists. Okay? And behaviorists is really what I would consider myself. I like studying the learned behaviors of animals and of humans. Okay? So behaviorists focus on learned behaviors. Things that animals are not normally born with, that either they are taught by mimicry or are like you sitting in a classroom or you watching this video learning about learned behavior, that is being taught something. Okay, so for example, this chimpanzee is learning, even though he's in the wild, he has a learned behavior. He was not born with the ability to know that he could use this stick as a tool to jab into a mound of ants and get food. Okay, he was taught that. And typically, this pattern of behavior is taught just through mimicry. He watched as a young chimpanzee his mom going through and foraging for food and using tools. And that way, he learned from watching his mom. Okay. Usually, behaviorists like to stay in an artificial environment like a laboratory or in a very controlled fieldwork. And they do this because they want to be able to control all of the variables as tightly as possible. Okay, so that video that you saw in class of the crow learning the multi-step problem solving, that was a behaviorist. Okay, they set up a controlled situation where they control the behavior, so when they get the results, they know which variables are causing those results. Sometimes these learned behaviors or behaviorists are more associated with psychology than biology. Okay, and that specifically has to do a lot with when we're talking about human learned behavior, and we'll get into that too in our classroom exercises. All right. So some examples of learned behavior, we have Ivan Pavlov, which is probably the quintessential or most commonly occurring example of a learned behavior or a behaviorist. All right. Pavlov's dog is as follows. He noticed that when he presented food to his dog Fido, or whatever his name was, that the dog salivated, meaning he drooled. Okay. When he rung a bell, the dog gave no response, no drooling, no nothing, just kind of looked at him. So he wondered, could he somehow associate the ringing of a bell with that drooling sensation? Could he figure out a way to do that? So he wanted to do what's called a conditioned stimulus. So that's this guy right here. Just ringing or just presenting a treat or food item and getting salivation, that was an unconditioned stimulus and response. Condition means something was trained or learned. All right. So the process that Ivan or Dr. Pavlov went through was as follows. For a long period of time, anywhere from, I think it was a few weeks, multiple times a day, he would present food and then rang the bell at the same time the food was presented. All right. And this happened consistently several times a day over several weeks. Over time, the dog associated that ringing of the bell with food. All right. So remember, when the food was present by itself, the dog salivated. When the food was present in addition to the ringing of the bell, the dog still salivated. After this conditioned, or this behavior was conditioned, we are able to ring the bell now, and the dog salivates with no food present. All right. And that's what is called a conditioned behavior. Next, we have Dr. B.F. Skinner, who has done a ton of work in operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is basically on display every single time you go to SeaWorld or any other amusement park that has animals in it. Okay, and we'll get into a lot with operant conditioning. That's really my expertise when it comes to the zoological field. And so that's where I put in the animal entertainment parks like SeaWorld and Busch Gardens. They employ Dr. Skinner's behaviors, specifically only positive reinforcement operant conditioning. All right, we do not do, or trainers don't do negative reinforcement, unlike the military, who actually does perform negative reinforcement on some of their animal training programs. So how do you train a behavior? Well, every behavior has three major components. We have the SD, or discriminative stimulus. I know that it's really should be DS, but we just call it SD. All right, and the stimulus is the command. So in this case, over here to the right, you can see the stimulus, or SD, is to sit. Okay, we told verbally to the dog, sit. In dolphin training, you'll see us do hand signals a lot, and you'll see that in class. So the stimulus in this case is the word sit. The dog then performs the behavior, whatever he's asked. Okay, so response is whatever the behavior actually is. All right, the bridge is if the dog did what the command says to do, he gets a bridge, and that is a click, usually with a clicker with a dog. It's usually a whistle with a dolphin, or it could be anything. It could be a tone, it could be a word. Doesn't really matter. When I was at Miami Seaquarium and I was working with sea lions, it was the word good. That was their bridge. And then finally, we have reinforcement, which is their treat for sitting. Now, the reason that we call this thing a bridge is because it literally bridges the gap between correct behavior with reinforcement. In this case, it would be a treat. So that bridge literally bridges the time span, okay, from correct behavior to giving a treat. That's why we call that a bridge. All right, so the flow here would be stimulus, behavior displayed, bridge, reinforcement. Okay? So how do you train a behavior? All right, and you guys will get some practice with this. This is obviously a dolphin. This is a trainer, or just someone in a picture, and then this is a target pull. And target pulls I'll talk a lot more about in class, but you'll get, a little sneak peek here. You want to start early. We started training our dolphins just after, I would say within weeks after weaning from mom. Killer whales, orcas, will actually train alongside with the moms. Now the trainers there don't directly train the calves, but they get it through mimicry of the mom. And they associate the hand signals, or the SDs, that the trainers give with the mom. So in essence, they're getting secondarily trained, if you will, while they're still very young. So they want to start early. You want to associate stimulus with reinforcement. We'll talk more about this in class, but there it is. All right. When we start basic training with a dolphin, we want to associate this target pull with reinforcement. So typically you'll touch the end of this target pull to the rostrum. That's what the nose is called in a dolphin, is a rostrum. It's not called a nose. And you touch it and then you start reinforcing. Just like that's similar to Pavlov's dog, where the food was present while the bell was ringing. All right. Begin with the end in mind. Have a mental picture, or have it laid out, of what you want the behavior to look like at the end. What do we want the animal to actually do? All right, have the end behavior in mind, and then work backwards in incremental steps. Step by step, how do I get that dolphin, that whale, that human being, that frustrated little 8th grader who knows everything but really doesn't? How do you work backwards to get them to do what you want them to do? Develop approximations is those step-by-step processes. All right, so baby steps gets you to the full-on behavior. And finally, the biggest key is show extreme patience. Some animals are incredibly intelligent and they learn stuff really, really fast. And some animals, like West Indian manatees, are really, really dumb. They just are. Some days they knew what I was asking. Other days they just looked at me with a blank stare. I've seen that stare from some students in my day, but never as frequently as a West Indian manatee. So show extreme patience as you go through the behaviors. Now we flip over to the other side of behavior. So far we've talked all about learned behaviors and behaviorists. Okay. On the other side of the coin, the other approach to behavior is ethology, or the science of animal behavior. And ethologists are the scientists that study ethology, obviously, And what the behaviors that they focus on are the innate or instinctual behaviors, things that don't have to be taught, things like breathing, okay? Things like spy hopping, which is what the orcas do when they come out of the water so they can see and visually look at their surroundings. Yawning would be another example, okay? Some other examples is play and hissing. Bees would be one. Suckling on a mammary gland would be another one, okay? These are all instinctual behaviors, things that don't have to be taught. All right, and ethologists are interested in examining as broad a variety of species as possible. They normally do it, they conduct their studies on an observational basis, where behaviorists set up a scenario that's controlled and they ask the animal to figure out or to be taught a behavior. Ethologists are really observers. They like to watch and they like to observe natural, normal behavior. Okay, so that's really the big difference, where behaviorists want to train or teach behaviors, and then ethologists just want to observe, and typically they observe in the wild. Our Geek of the Week is Jane Goodall. She is an ethologist. She is the world's foremost expert on chimpanzees. So know that Jane Goodall is an ethologist and the world's foremost expert on chimpanzees. And here's a cool quote from her. "You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." And that's a powerful quote, right? And that's why I left it there. Every single day that you're on this earth, you make a difference. Whether that difference is positive, negative, or neutral, you're making some kind of difference to someone in this world. And it's up to you to figure out what kind of difference you want to make. Some examples of innate behaviors are spider webs. Spiders are not taught how to make a spider web, they just kind of do it. Reflexes are another example of a innate behavior. If I come up behind you and I smack my hands together and make a loud noise, more than likely you're going to jump. And that's just a reflexive behavior. All right. And finally, we have fixed action patterns. And this is what we're going to talk a lot about in class, and how marketers, or savvy marketers, which unfortunately is not what you normally see on TV, but savvy marketers use your fixed action patterns against you and enforce you to do things that you wouldn't normally do, even though you don't normally want to do them. You actually do them, with a grin on your face, which is fun for us marketers. But for you biologist likers, fixed action patterns do exist in nature quite frequently. And one example would be a gull. These are pictures of gulls, and this is a fixed action pattern test. And what we've done, or what we've observed, is these particular gulls have this red dot in the lower jaw of their beak. Okay, this red dot. And their young, the younglings, will actually go in and they will use their beak and kind of tap or peck at this red dot, saying, "Mom, give me food. Mom, give me food. Mom, give me food." So they wanted to see just what is the key here. Is it the red dot? Is it just mom's shape of head? Is it a bill? Is it a combination? What is the trigger that is causing that young gull to peck at the mom's beak? So the study went as follows. They had the natural head, the natural thing, just this would be the control group, and they got the normal control pecking rate. Then they had a model, an analog, not of a real gull adult head, but mimicking. Okay, so just a model. We actually had a little bit of an increase in the pecking rate there. So then the actual trials with the different types of bills went on. What I mean by that is they presented the same shape of the model, but with no bill whatsoever, and you see the lowest pecking rate. So we know that it has to do something with either the bill or that red dot. So more tests were done. To confirm that, they just showed the bill with the red dot, but no head. And we got a huge increase in pecking rate, right on line with the natural, real head of the mom. Okay, so the head shape means nothing to these gulls. It's just something to do with the spot and or the beak. And finally, we added several other spots and just the bill in a different model analog, and we got the highest amount of pecking rate by the youngling. So then we wanted to see, was it the beak shape or was it the dot? And so we had one natural head for the models, one had a spot, one didn't have a spot, and we could see that with no spot, or we actually have no spot and no movement. So no spot and no movement yielded very low pecking rates. So we figured out that not only is it not the head that had anything to do with pecking rate, it really wasn't the beak either. The key to this behavior, or the trigger, if you will, the trigger of the fixed action pattern, the FAP, was the red dot. Okay, so that is the Gall's red dot experiment. In class, because I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, we're almost done here, I will talk about turkey mothers and the polecat. So remind me to talk about turkey mothers and the polecats, and I will. We humans, just like most mammals, have ingrained behavior called fight or flight. We either have an instinctual thing ingrained in us when danger is coming at us, to either fight it, to try and fight it off, or to flight, which is basically run away like a little girl. Okay? I will tell you that the average person has flight, or the runaway version of that fixed action pattern, ingrained in their system a lot more than the fight. And that is the end of our discussion tonight. I look forward to seeing you guys in class tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. I always have a lot of fun with this lesson. I'm looking forward to it. Your video secret number for this lesson is going to be 20. 20 is your video secret number. All right. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.